Joining us on the program tonight, we have with us Mr. P.N. Vijay from the BJP, Arun Kumar, economist and author of The Black Economy in India, Abhay Aima, the director of HDFC Securities, is with us, and Yogendra Yadav, the national president of Swaraj India, also joins us tonight. Mr. Vijay, how should we look at this development? You have the government that has on one hand told Parliament that this was a decision that they took after the Reserve Bank board decided this. And you have the Reserve Bank telling a parliamentary panel that it was the complete opposite, that they went by the government's advice.
Well, Nidhi, I don't want to go into the particulars of this case because it will come out in greater detail. The point is that central governments in India have always had a love-hate relationship with the RBI. And it's a very difficult situation in a developing country because while the RBI is the repository of monetary policy and exchange policy, it is the government which decides on things like fiscal deficit, growth rates, etc. So all this is a very thin red line. If you look at it empirically, and I want to explain this to you, when we had the most momentous decision in India in 1991, when we had that big economic crisis, the government of India decided to borrow, and it used the gold reserves. The reserves are totally under the RBI's purview, and asked the RBI to ship out the gold. Again in 1991 June, when Manmohan Singh and Narasimha Rao started the reforms, a lot of those reforms, including a devaluation of the rupee, was announced by the government, and RBI, you can read it in Venkataramanan's writings, he was first the finance secretary and then moved to RBI, was just implemented. Again in the 60s, when Mrs. Gandhi devalued the Indian rupee, it was a decision taken by the government and RBI was asked to implement it. So historically in India, I'm not saying this is right, the government has tended to have an upper hand in the dealings, and I can only say in developed countries, the central bank has a lot of independence, but in developing countries, many of the things, because the elected government
Vijay,
comes with a mandate from the people.
I will take the point that you made on a tradition of perhaps what you're saying is a tradition of curtailed autonomy of the RBI, which not everybody
I just want to complete this.
Yeah.
Nidhi, I just want to complete this. In developing countries, there is this because, for example, in this case, Narendra Modi came to power with a clear mandate from the people to do something about black money. And I'm quite happy that he has done this. I'm also very happy that the RBI is in agreement with this. Though I see your point about the protocol of it, the modality of it, on that I think we need to look at it further.
Because, and that's what I was coming to, which is that at the very least I think people deserve to know the sequence of events that surrounded this decision, and at the moment we have one version from the government in Parliament and we have another version from the RBI also to a parliamentary panel, and that doesn't speak very well for the credibility of either at this point. Because you know
no, I don't think it's the credibility of the RBI that's involved, because you know, RBI is what it is, government is what it is, and there are many actions. For example, in early December, when government leaned on the RBI to cut interest rates post demonetization, Urjit Patel held his ground and kept interest rates the same. So it's really a bit of a tug of war. Government wants more fiscal deficits, wants more growth, more spending.
But
RBI doesn't like it.
Mr.
Government
Vijay,
has a mandate on black money.
These are two completely different versions of what happened.
It's not going to get solved tomorrow, Nidhi. It's a very big issue. In India, it will go on like this.
No, I mean, the RBI has a different version of how the note ban decision came about because it has a love-hate relationship with the government. Is that why? I don't understand.
No. My own sense is, and we are talking only about news reports, I want to hear
no, they're not news reports. We have the note that has been submitted to the parliamentary panel. Mr. Vijay, we have the entire note submitted to the parliamentary panel. I'm not going by a newspaper report. We've seen the note ourselves.
No. I know that the RBI's note I've also read. I want to get the Piyush Goyal speech in Parliament is not an official response of the government, right? I'd like to hear what the finance minister
says about it. He's not a minister in the government of India?
But
he spoke in the Rajya Sabha?
I'm saying it is, Nidhi, don't talk rubbish. He's not the Minister for Finance. There is something called an
A
official
minister
statement
of the
from
government of
Ministry
India
Finance.
speaks in
That has to
Parliament.
come
That's
out.
not
That
rubbish,
has to come
Mr.
out.
Vijay. That's
And-
a fact.
and-
Yogendra Yadav wants to come in on that. Yes.
I'm truly astonished. There is something called collective responsibility of the Council of Ministers. And when an agriculture minister speaks about foreign policy on the floor of the House, he or she represents the government. You have clearly a very interesting definition of rubbish, and I don't want to use those adjectives for what you are saying, sir. But this violates absolutely elementary protocols. The simple fact is that Mr. Goyal has been caught lying to the Parliament of India, which is a very, very serious affair. If he were to say this about any ministry, it doesn't matter, sir. This is a standard parliamentary protocol. No, either you keep shut, or if you speak as a minister, you speak on behalf of the government. That is the elementary protocol.
Well, Mr. Vijay, would you like to respond to Yogendra Yadav's criticism that you cannot?
I couldn't hear Yogendra Bhai. I couldn't hear Yogendra Bhai.
He's accused the minister of lying in Parliament, and he's made the point that it's a collective responsibility. When a member of the Union Cabinet gets up and speaks in Parliament, then it is the view of the government. I mean, it is Parliament. It's not a sound bite that's been given somewhere outside. It's
I think Yogendra Bhai has a very good point. I think there is something called the privilege issue, route which can be taken. But I want to say one thing. I want to say this with sincerity, that the speeches made in Parliament during a session do not always represent the views of the government. You please take it from me. Different ministers may say different things. But if the minister says something wrong, there is a different parliamentary procedure for that. But that does not become the official view of the finance ministry. That's the point I want to say.
I don't understand that. Yogendra Yadav disagrees with that. But let me get Professor Arun Kumar, into this debate. How do you look at the way the RBI is being looked at today in the course ever since the 8th of November? Because there's been criticism on the number of flip-flops that we saw, the lack of communication from the RBI governor, whom we didn't hear of for such a long time. Finally, you have had RTIs that were filed, asking for information. And the most amazing RTI is this one, in which an activist wanted to know the minutes of the board meeting where this note ban decision was taken, right? And the response was that the RBI would not give this information because it will endanger the life or the physical safety of any person to do this. That's absurd.
Absolutely. I think what this note shows and makes clear to everybody is that there was very little preparation in going in for this demonetization. For instance, 95,000 crores of 2,000 rupee notes were there, and still the RBI took this decision on the plea that this would be enough. Now, in what circumstances could it be enough? Because they said electronic, etc., would be there. But, this decision, as you rightly said, was from the government to the RBI, and then RBI returned it, and all within a space of a day. How could such a momentous decision be taken within a day? And that's why they had to do so many flip-flops. That's why they've had to deny things, because things were going wrong. Neither the government had considered, so neither the government comes out looking very good out of it, nor the RBI comes out looking very good out of it. Because the RBI should have the board should have been given time to consider this as to what the consequences would be, especially for the unorganized sector. And I think in the decision that was taken from the note that you have got, there's no consideration about those who depend on cash. Yes, the organized sector could do with checks and with the electronic transfers, etc., but the unorganized sector could not. And that should have been obvious. That should have been a point for discussion in the RBI board.
So you're saying this reflects what you feel was the lack of preparation
complete lack
in going into
yes,
this?
Complete lack of preparation in going for it, because this decision could have been postponed till enough currency was printed. But suddenly they were told, and then they said, yes, we should do it. But what was the discussion before that? 2 years back, they were thinking of 5,000 and 10,000 rupee currency note also. Now, what it points to is that this currency printing had nothing to do with demonetization. So, 2,000 rupee currency printing was to do with inflation rather than with demonetization.
Which the note says. Yeah, because
so,
they say that demonetization was not discussed
that's
earlier.
Right. And also this 5,000 and 10,000 rupee currency note, which was to be issued and which the government decided not to do. But 2,000 rupee was printed because of inflation, not because of demonetization. So in other words, this decision that with demonetization we have to print new currency notes, etc., that link is not there.
So then, Abhay Aima, the question that one then raises is, has there been a lack of transparency by the RBI and the government, and particularly the RBI, which has generally been seen as a relatively independent and autonomous institution? And should we have heard more? Should they have been more transparent about what went into this decision-making process and responded to these RTIs? Surely you would agree that nobody's life or physical safety would be in danger by knowing about what happened in that board meeting.
See, few things, Nidhi. One, let's understand exercise of this magnitude has not been ever tried before anywhere in the world. When you take into consideration 14.8 lakh crore notes, when you take into consideration the spread of the country, when you take into consideration the banking that exists in a country. So if you were to compare apples and apples, so to my knowledge, something like this has not been attempted before. So let's keep that in a perspective before we start shooting from the hip. Secondly, exercise like this is not taken into having a huge think tank and broad consultations, because if you tend to do that, for example, the criticism on ATM. Now, if one was to take into account ATM experts, various other experts, and had taken a decision like this, the whole purpose of this exercise would have been defeated. The third accusation that that the flip-flop, I mean, you call it flip-flop, I call it flexibility. When you take such a momentous decision, it is only stupid to say that, look, because I am RBI or because I am Ministry of Finance and because I have said something and it's my ego, I will not change. You change as the circumstances evolve. You change because this is like, there's no track record to say what do we do.
Times,
so I would actually give them credit for being flexible.
You're flexible more than 60, 70 times in the
Even
course
if
of
it
an
is
announcement?
600 times.
Okay,
Even if it is 600
times of flexibility.
I would be rather happy than if I stood ground like the previous ministers. Previous ministers have stood ground, and we have seen some horrendous decisions being taken in the budget previously, and then just because you didn't want to come back on that, the whole country suffered.
But Mr. Aima, why does the government say that it was the RBI's decision? Why did the government say that this was the RBI's decision to demonetize, and the RBI is saying the opposite? I mean, are we also not supposed to ask those questions because it's such a big, momentous decision that has taken place?
Of course, you're supposed to ask those questions, but let's not. Technically, this decision can only be taken by the Reserve Bank of India. But please, looking at like I said, look at the decision. It is impossible to say Reserve Bank of India on its own in the board meeting decided let's go ahead and do this. The government of the day has to be a party to it. Would have even if they initiated it, doesn't matter. The board, whether it is 1 day or whether it is 5 days, when the board sat down and if they thought it was disastrous, they could have overruled the decision.